Thank you. Yeah, you're very nice to me considering I'm about to put you out of about 16 jobs. So Agile is dead. Complain to @PragDave. I don't like doing this talk. And I don't like it because it kind of feels a bit cynical and a bit, well, negative, frankly. But at the same time, I think it's really important because I really, really, really value what we did. And I still think that there is incredible value in it. And it just breaks my heart to see what's become of agility. Now, to understand that, I think we have to go back in time. Right? So this is where I do that woo thing, right? And everybody wiggles around. And we go back in time to 1999. So what happened in 1999? Well, in no particular order, you guys had a phenomenal storm that destroyed the western suburbs of Sydney. You also had a referendum where you quite wisely decided not to upset Her Majesty. I just think it's just the polite thing to do, you know? In 1999, Bill Gates became the richest man in the world. In 1999, Apple released the Power Mac G4, which I still think is I would love to see them re-release, a new computer, but in that case, because that case is so gorgeous, Absolutely gorgeous. The only thing it'd be better is if it was transparent with flashing lights. But I love that thing. Also in 1999, Bill Clinton was proved not to have done anything wrong, which was fantastic. Talking about doing things wrong, we had the Phantom Menace. Napster was started. Remember Napster? DeForest Kelley died. Thank you. I actually met DeForest Kelley. I was 11 years old, and my parents were living in New Jersey, and we went across the West Coast for some business trip of my father's, and we went to SeaWorld, and DeForest Kelley was there. So I actually went up to him. I was like really brave. I went up to him and said hello, and he said hello to me. So we have a relationship, and it was deeply disturbing that he died. But obviously the most important thing of all is that the first episode of SpongeBob appeared in 1999. So that's the kind of world we were living in. All right, that was the real world. What about this fake world that you and I inhabit? Well, in this fake world, how were we doing stuff? By and large, we were doing it kind of badly. So how did we plan our software? Sometimes we were using this unified modeling language, UML. UML sort of like took off gradually, but sort of steamrolled it its way to become like the standard way of representing software. It, on its own, is responsible for totally and absolutely corrupting an entire generation of object-oriented programmers. And it did that by focusing on classes and not objects. So when you first start drawing a UML diagram, you draw a class diagram. And a class diagram has absolutely nothing to do with your running program. A class diagram assumes that you can do what Victorian gentlemen scientists did, and that is classify everything into nice structures of trees, right? That's not the real world. You can't do it like that. But we persisted, and we used UML class diagrams as some kind of proof that, yes, we were being rigorous and we were designing our software. They were crap. So, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of UML because of that. There's got some really nice things in it. Activity diagrams, fantastic. But the rest, no thanks. What else were we doing? Well, we had some procedures. We had the rational unified process. Yay. The rational unified process implies that there was the irrational unified process and the rational, I don't know, what's disunified or something, I don't know, right? it really wasn't that bad, but it really wasn't that good either. It was fundamentally a kind of modified waterfall with just a bit more paperwork. But how are we all doing this, right? Was this like solving our problems? No. Software development really was more like this. Man the barricades, shoot things if they move, and just hope like hell we have enough to get us through to the next, whatever, cycle. All right? And that's how we developed software. It really was pretty much just wild and whatever worked, worked. At the meantime, there were people who have been playing with different ways of doing things. So Kent Beck, Walt Cunningham were off at Chrysler playing around in Smalltalk, trying to do a payroll system. And they came up with some ideas that they later put into Extreme Programming Explained. Jim Highsmith had adaptive software development. Andy and I were documenting kind of just like, we were nowhere near, we weren't trying to do a methodology of any kind, we were just like documenting some practices that we thought were a good idea. Things like Scrum. Any idea when sort of Scrum started? Show of hands. 1996 or later. 1990 or later. 1986. No, sorry, yeah, 1986 or later. Yeah, it was actually around about 1984 or 5 that Scrum started. But people were starting to do Scrums and found it a useful way of communicating inside a team. And of course, we had Alistair Cockburn just basically scaring everybody into submission. So we had all of these various groups of people who were working on sort of like different ways of doing stuff. And they were all saying, hey, this is working for me. And we would get together. The typical place we'd meet is OOPSLA, the Object-Oriented, whatever it is, Programming Language Systems conference. And we would get together and we would chat about the stuff we were doing. And it became apparent that a lot of us shared a kind of common belief, even though we had wildly different ways of implementing that. So there was actually a lot in common between some of the ideas of ASD, of XP, of Scrum. Alistair's Crystal was just starting up. They all had a bit of something in common. So we decided to get together to discuss this. And this would be round about the end of the year. And so, a nice place to go would be somewhere warm and sunny. And so we first suggested that we were going to head out to Caribbean Island, and just sit there and talk. And that quickly got nixed when we all thought about the ideas of explaining to our families that we would be going to a Caribbean island, honestly, to work. So instead, we chose a ski resort in Utah called Snowbird. And we all turned up there, and we sat down for the first day in a meeting room. First thing we did is we took the tables out, moved them out to the side. We had a circle of chairs, and somebody, might have been Martin, handed out a bunch of blank index cards. And we wrote down what we were hoping to get out of the day. And then we all had a whole bunch of fun writing on these cards with Sharpies and then throwing them into the middle of the circle and playing little games like, can we make a pile by throwing, and this kind of stuff. It was really good fun. And then we picked them all up and we sorted them out into categories, and we came up with some stuff to talk about. And one of the things that was apparent was we wanted to try and work out what each of us valued about software development. And we talked for the rest of the morning about what we valued. And it's kind of hard to talk about values because you kind of give examples, but it's really hard to kind of like spin a value down. And so we got to the lunch break, and we kind of got somewhere, but we weren't too sure about it. And so we all went and got our sandwiches, and we were wandering around. And Martin and I were standing at a whiteboard and trying to discuss, sort of how you talk about values. And we got into these sort of like, I know what I don't like discussion. And we thought, oh, maybe that's a way of expressing values. And that's where we came up with this A over B formulation in the Agile Manifesto, which was pretty cool. And so pretty much by the end of lunch, we actually had 5 of those initially. And I wish I could actually find a picture of those 5, because it'd be kind of cool to know what the 5th one was. But throughout the afternoon then, we discussed that. I mean, all we had initially was the 4 things in the middle there, and then we kind of, iterated around a bit, came up with something we all agreed with, and that was it, basically. The people who were skiing went out and did some skiing, and the rest of us just sat in the hotel and looked at the people coming back from skiing with snow all over their faces. And that was cool. And that was, the fundamental work. We spent another day and we put together some practices and this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, this is what we wanted to communicate. The values that we had when developing the software. And with that, we all just went our separate ways. And some people stayed and helped develop the concept of agility. Some of us just went back to doing work and just doing the stuff we were doing. It wasn't like the start of a movement. So what we produced is called this: the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. All right? The most important problem in the whole Agile world is that people have forgotten that that's what it's called. And instead, they call it that: the Agile Manifesto. And that one change, I think, is responsible for the death of Agile. What's the difference between that and that? The difference is the use of the word agile. Okay? What's wrong with this? Someone tell me. It's a noun. It's implying that agile is something you have a manifesto about. If this was real English, then what it's really saying is we invented a manifesto that is really spry. It can jump around the table and do backflips. No, right? That's what an agile manifesto is. Right? No, it's a manifesto for agile software development. It's an adjective, not a noun. But the problem is that it got this common name, the Agile Manifesto, and that is the root of all of our problems. If you wanted to just have a nice small phrase, the Agility Manifesto is perfectly fine. It's a manifesto about agility. Agility is the noun form of agile, but it is not the Agile Manifesto. So, interestingly, if you go to the dictionaries online, you actually find definitions which include the Agile Manifesto in it. But agile is an adjective able to move quickly and easily. All right? That's what we're looking for. That is the important part of agile. It is an adjective saying that we can move quickly and easily. So agile is, as we've said, an adjective. We can talk about an agile gymnast, an agile programmer, even an agile methodology, God help us. Although, personally, I don't believe that there are such a thing. But we cannot talk about the Agile Alliance. Right? What does that mean? What could it possibly mean? Right? An alliance that's agile? No. We can't read. I mean, no one in their right mind should ever read a blog post that says how to do agile. Right? That's like saying how to do green. It doesn't make any sense at all. What is agile? It's a bloody adjective. And of course, we have the Cosmo, 10 ways to know that agile is cheating on you. But why did that stick? Why did this idea that agile is a noun take off? Well, the reason is that nouns can be sold. Right? I can't go down to my local fruit market and buy a pound of red, but I can't go down and buy a pound of apples because it's a noun. I can buy nouns. I can't really buy adjectives. So nouns sell. Once we manage to incorporate this idea that agile is a thing, then guess what? I can train you. I can charge you money to learn how to do this. I can do consultancy. I can be an agile consultant, which means I can go into your organization and I can tell you what you need to buy, probably from me, in order to become more agile. I'm kind of guilty of this. I can write books that tell you, all the various intricate details of all the various things you have to do if you want to be agile. And obviously, we can have conferences all about agility. To my mind, having a conference about agility is a bit about like having a conference about ballet dancing. Right? What are you going to talk about? What kind of shoes do you wear? I don't know. But it's not really about agility. And the other thing is that once you've got this idea that agility is a thing, and guess what? You, the general public, don't know how to do it, then you're starting to use fear. And fear is the ultimate sales tool. So you will find that the people who try to sell you the agile stuff are people who are trying to make you afraid. And so they will talk to you using brand new words, words that you've not used before. Or they'll take existing words and they will use it in such a way that it doesn't make any sense at all. Right? I don't know what you're talking about. A spike? A sprint? What on earth do you mean? Oh, it's okay. I can tell you. Just bring me into your organization. I can tell you. And as long with new words, we're going to have new roles. We're going to tell people different, you are no longer, a grade 3, class 7 programmer. No, you're going to be a tester, or you're going to be a coach, or whatever it might be. And these new roles are kind of scary too. How do I do this? What do I do to do this? We're going to tell you new ways to measure things. All the old ways they used to do it are wrong. Now you're going to do it using some kind of story points and whatever else it might be. It's just like crazy. This is not the way you'd learn how to do things. And most importantly, you're going to be afraid because you're never going to know if you're doing it right. It's not all negative. Because cool sells as well. I mean, think about, the original book that started all this off, right? Extreme Programming Explained. Extreme programming. That sounds like, rock climbing or, base jumping or something really, really cool, right? And I've gone from being this person that sits in this cubicle to being a cool guy that does extreme programming, And not just extreme programming, but we actually dropped the first E, so it's extreme programming, right? Wow. So that's cool. And I think that is a large part of the initial adoption, right? This extreme programming, which includes a practice of not being afraid, is like really a cool thing to do. Right? It elevates your job from the mundane to the quirky, to the dangerous. We like bright and shiny things. Just look at, I don't know what the current JavaScript build tool is, because I haven't been online this morning, but, bright and shiny sells, right? And why? A lot of it is because we're kind of like hoping that the next thing would be better than the last thing. And maybe it is for the first 2 days, and then it goes back to being the same. Why? Because it's not the tool, it's the person using the tool. You've got to learn what you're doing before you find a tool that will make it work, right? So bright and shiny is again, a way people will sell things to you. People will sell you this sense of power, from the names to the fact that, yes, now you are in control, right? It's gone from being crap to being in control. And there's also this thing, which I really hate, which is this kind of peer pressure. And peer pressure is a really dangerous thing, I think, because there's actually a whole bunch of value to being uncertain. If you haven't made your mind up yet of, is this right, is this wrong? And then you're pressured into a particular belief by, overall peer pressure, then you're not thinking, and you're not being able to make up your own mind. And I kind of come, I guess, from the Ruby community recently, and I love that community. It's done some really great things, but it has, I think, a really serious flaw. It's turned testing into a religion. It's made testing actually more important than writing the code itself. And so we have all these things like, if people say, I'm going to ship you some software, it's show me the tests. Right? Their company could be burning around them, and they're going to refuse this software because they don't like the tests. Or they don't like the fact it was written using test unit, and they wanted it written using RSpec or whatever else. Right? It's crazy. Right? Tests are just a tool, but the peer pressure has made them into something way, way bigger than that. And as a result, we're not thinking about it properly. So my feeling is that just because of that one thing, the fact that we call Agile a noun, the Agile Manifesto, has allowed Agile to become an industry. And if you need any proof of that at all, I wrote the blog post, Agile is dead. I don't know when it was now, 18 months ago or something. And of course, Google notices this, and so I start getting little sidebar ads for various Agile things. And my favorite, by a long way, is this one. Scrum Master training, the world is adopting Scrum. Are you? Stop thinking and get certified today. Yeah, you go for it. So that was the first 8 years, perhaps, of the 21st century. And if you look at Agile adoption, then you'll see that the curve goes up dramatically at the start, and then kind of evens out a bit. It's certainly growing, but it's not growing at anywhere close to the rate it was initially. And so people involved in trying to monetize this new thing looked around for alternative ways of generating revenue streams. And they realized that what they'd been doing up to now was effectively selling to individual developers. Right? It may have been in companies, but it was still practices for developers. Where's the money? Well, the money is in the enterprise. And so we started seeing enterprise agile. Right? Not necessarily bad. This is Craig Larman's work. Not necessarily bad. And fundamentally, all this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever it is, agile teams all put within a box, right? So it's not revolutionary, but that's okay. But interestingly, right, given he wants to sell into organizations and enterprise organizations, there's actually a little secret here that makes that work. And it's that little legend down there that you can't actually read. But that legend is what makes this an enterprise practice. Somehow I suspect that that is an understatement. But if you want the ultimate in enterprise agile, there is nothing to beat the audacity, the sheer scope of the scaled agile framework, SAFe. It is an unbelievable piece of work. In many ways. The interesting thing to me is that we actually have the agile release train running on the feature runway. which you'd think would kind of make a mess of the runway, but whatever. What time do I finish? 12:15, perfect. It's only lunch afterwards, right? Okay, so I can just run on forever, yeah, okay. So, I think it is time to put a stop to this. And I think it's time to put a stop to this because I think it's in all our interests to find a better way. Here is my definition of agility. And it's really simple. It's simply feedback. Find out where you are. This is a bit like Dan was talking earlier on about change. And the first thing you want to do is to visualize, to find out where you are. Yeah? Next step, take a small step towards the goal. The smaller, the better. Then adjust your understanding based on what you learned. This is the feedback step. That is really subtle because it also implies you don't take a step without knowing how you're going to judge what happened. So you have to think about the feedback before you start. Think of it as test first doing. And then, after you've done that, you're going to repeat. And that's all there is to agility. There is nothing else. Except that you apply this fractally. You apply this at the lowest possible level. What do I name this parameter? And yes, you can run through those steps on naming parameters. And you apply it at the highest possible level to how do I run projects in my organization? Because built into this is the feedback that allows you to change and fix things when they go wrong, but only after you've measured to see that they have gone wrong. So that's what you do. And it wouldn't be a proper methodology unless I tell you how to do it as well. So here's how to do it. If you're faced with two or more alternatives that achieve roughly the same thing, choose the one that's easiest to change in the future. That sentence is every single design, methodology, philosophy, rule that you have ever read anywhere in anyone's books or consultancies or talks. Because the only measure of good design, is how easy is this software to change. There is nothing else. So, if you do this, you will be writing software with agility. You don't need anything else. You don't need to go and buy tools and all sorts of other crap until one of those steps tells you that, hey, it would be really useful, I could record these things. Oh, let's go buy some index cards or whatever it might be, all right? That's all you need. If you want to see an example of agility, I love this little guy. It's a two-wheeled, self-balancing robot. And this one is going around in a circle, just like most developers, on very rocky and stony ground. And you'll notice that it was correcting as it goes. So it's still going in a circle, even though it's all kind of like rough and it has to stop every now and then and fight its way over an obstacle. That's really cool. How does it do that? It does it using feedback. Basically, what it is, it's an upside-down pendulum. So it's a pendulum that's pivoted on the wheels at the bottom, and it can go back and forth like this. Now, obviously, if it doesn't do anything, if it just starts to lean this way, it's going to fall over. So what it does is it notices that, oh, look, I'm leaning that way, and it scoots the wheels forward a bit faster to bring the center of gravity back in line with the wheels. And that's fundamentally what it does, except if all you do is do that, if all you do is say, oh, look, I'm beginning to fall, zip, then you'll find that your system is dramatically unstable. And it'll basically shake itself to pieces. It'll just overshoot the whole time. and then just flap itself into the ground. That's just physics. So over the years, engineers have come up with ways to solve this. And the classical way to do that, and the way that's built into probably most of your household electronics, or things like washing machines, dishwashers, everything else, is something called a PID controller. A PID controller has 3 feedback components. It has the immediate error. That's the P side. It stands for proportional. So the P side says, oh, look, we're leaning a little bit, so we don't have to put much adjustment in. Or we're leaning a lot. We better get those wheels moving really fast. That's the P side. Then, to calm that down and to stop it overshooting, we add in the history. The I stands for integration. So we're looking at the past, and we're averaging stuff out. Because if the history says, hey, you know what? Although it looks bad, it really isn't as bad as you think it is, then you can maybe put a little less control into the wheels. And then last, but by no means least, the D side is what effect is my change going to have on reality, right? What's the difference that's going to come out of here? And the D stands for differentiation. It's the first derivative of the change. And basically, all you have to do when you're creating a PID controller is to measure those 3 things, and then you assign a multiplying factor to each of them, and if you get those factors right, you end up with a stable system. Getting the factors right is black magic, but it can be done. And interestingly, PID controllers were actually invented for ships, because around the turn of the century, ships got so big that it turns out that humans were really, really bad at steering them. Because when you steer a big ship, you turn the wheel, and nothing happens. And then maybe 30 seconds later, you start to be able to notice it's turning. But if you instead say, oh, look, nothing's happening, you turn the wheel more and more and more, it's going to start turning too much. And by the time you notice that, you're going to be going back the other way and overcorrecting. And it'll be just like that little guy wobbling back and forth and falling over. So they had to find a way to fix that. And they actually created mechanical PID controllers that used the proportion of error, the integration of the error, and the differentiation of the error. And they found that that allowed ships to be steered a lot better. And nowadays, on many ships, you can actually see the PID controller will actually show you the error on your steering, and so you can actually adjust your steering taught by the PID controller, and that tends to be the best of both worlds, because you then have humans and that controller both working together, which is kind of cool. So that's it, right? This idea of PID, of feedback, is all you need to be agile. So I went to a conference in India, and I was sitting on the bus from the airport behind 2 well-known, famous agile consultants. They were speakers at the conference. And they were talking. I was like zoned out. I was tired. They were talking, and one of them said, hey, when was the last time you wrote any code? And the other guy was really proud. He said, oh, it was 1999. And the other guy said, oh, I got you beat. Mine's 1997. And I got to thinking, these guys are going to go to a conference and tell, 500 eager, naive in a way, developers how to do stuff that they themselves have not done, that couldn't do. You put them in front of a terminal now and say, here, write this, they wouldn't be able to do it. They are not qualified. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. So I wrote this blog post. I got really angry. And I wrote this blog post, which basically summarized the first half of this talk. Right? And it was actually probably my most popular blog post in terms of feedback. Not all of it pleasant. But that was fun. And I thought, OK, I'm going to be a pariah now in the Agile community, which is probably not a bad thing. Instead, I immediately get invited to the Scrum Gathering in Shanghai. And I thought that would be cool. All right, because my wife and I love China. We love going to China. So we said, yeah, OK, we'll go over there. But you do realize I wrote that blog post, don't you? And they said, oh, yeah, it's OK. It would be interesting. So I tend to look a little bit into conferences before I go, just to see what the kind of theme is. This conference actually had a kind of a motto, a theme. And its motto was this. And my wife actually speaks some Mandarin. And she looked at this and says, that doesn't make any sense to me. So we went to the original oracle of this. We went to Google and fed this in. And the answer came back, swordsman. And I thought, maybe they knew what they were doing when they invited me. But no, it can't possibly be swordsman, can it? So I thought, okay, let's translate each of the individual characters. So I split it into the 4 characters, and it came back as Laugh Proud River Lake. Obvious now. So Juliet, the next time she went to a Chinese teacher, showed her this and says, what? And the teacher said, oh, what you're looking at here is a YOW, which is a phrase, always 4 characters, which is a metaphor for something. And typically they are drawn from old poems or stories, and they are kind of like our proverbs, but they're very formalized, very stylized into four characters. The YOW here, the swordsman, actually is the name of a novel that was first written, or was written in the 1960s, and it's actually a made-up YOW. But the story is a real one. It's to do with the fact that back in feudal China, if you didn't live near a river, you had to get your goods down to the river in order to trade. And that was a really dangerous thing to do because there were, bandits who would steal things from you on the route. And so the idea of the YOW was kind of like, be brave, be resolute in the face of adversity. Yeah? And so the swordsman had that as his kind of motto, be brave, be resolute, laugh in the face of danger. So when I went to this conference, I thought, well, what better thing could I do than tell an audience of 600 Chinese people what their Chinese meant? Yeah? So I sat there and I brought this up, and I translated it as, don't let the turkeys get you down. And I had to explain that a little bit. So I explained turkey. Turkey, by the way, the 2 characters there are fire chicken. Is that cool? All right. And I explained get you down. But mostly, I explained that don't let the turkeys get you down really means, that some people think they are important. All right, these are the turkeys. And people who think they're important, don't let them tell you what to do just because they think they're important. Laugh in the face of their adversity. You see what I did there? I took the theme of the conference and turned it against them. But I also turned it against myself because I said, I'm a turkey. I'm one of these people that stands there and tells other people what to do. And in fact, all experts are turkeys. Everybody who tells you what to do is a turkey. We tell you exactly what to do. We tell you how to do it. We give you rules. So when you learn an agile methodology, what you learn is a set of rules for how to do stuff. And that is totally, absolutely wrong. It's provably wrong because no rules are universal, apart from that one. They can never tell you what to do because every single rule that you have requires context. Is it a good thing to cut someone's throat? Generally, no. But if you're a doctor performing a tracheotomy, then yes, you're saving someone's life. I have challenged people when I give talks like this to tell me, give me a rule, give me a universal rule that you have to obey in all contexts. And no. No one's come up with one yet. So there are no rules that are universal. Anybody who gives you rules on how to behave in your project is wrong. There are no rules. And that's really scary, because how do you know what to do? And the simple answer is, you don't. You have no idea what to do next. Now, is this the point where everybody goes out and cuts their own throats? No, because I've already given you the answer. Whenever you don't know what to do, and this is nothing to do with software, this is to do with life. Whenever you don't know what to do, all you got to do is this. Work out where you are, take a small step, work out if it's better or worse. Repeat. That's all there is to it. So if you follow those steps, then you will find yourself automatically adopting practices that may or may not be, quote, agile. They will come up with something which is in context for you. And if you remember to apply these rules both at the small scale and the large scale, then you will automatically adapt your processes as your context changes. And that's exactly what you want to do. So how do we reclaim agility? We do it. All it requires is one of Kent Beck's original practices for XP. It requires courage. It requires the ability to stand up to people who are trying to sell you things, people who are trying to make you afraid. Stand up to the fearmongers. You already know the values of agility. All you have to do is to have courage to apply them. And always, always remember that you don't do anything until you know how to get feedback and then get that feedback. That's all there is to it. So please remember, agile is not what you do. Agility is how you do it. Thank you.